And welcome back to my rundown and discussion on the Holy Heston Trilogy, as it is known by me and my film collector friends. As I said in the last video, um, these are actually the first three films that I ever saw, aside from a kindergarten trip to see Bambi. Um, it was during a weekend that our local theater had a Charlton Heston revival for a weekend, and I guess my dad had plans, was doing something probably honky tonk related, and for 3 nights in a row, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday over a weekend, he dropped me off at the theater by myself. I was only 9 years old. Um, and yeah, times were so much different. I mean, imagine dropping off your 9-year-old and not being involved and killed in a mass shooting or, something like that. Kidnapped and murdered by a serial killer or killed in a mass shooting. But you could do things back then. Now, so of course I didn't see these when they were released, but um, even in the 80s and 90s, you could do that. So we're going to do number two in chronological order. First was 1968's Planet of the Apes, and this is 1971's The Omega Man. Yes, oh yes, oh yes, in every way, yes, yes, yes. Do that to me one more time. So yeah. Now Charlton Heston stars in it, along with Anthony Zerbe, Rosalind Cash. It was directed by Boris Sagal. It was transcribed, or they took the screenplay from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, and it was turned into a screenplay by Joyce Hooper Corrington and her husband, John William Corrington, and it was released in 1971. And yeah, now some interesting trivia about it. Okay, let's rate it PG. Um, some interesting trivia about it. It was originally about vampires, but her and her husband didn't really want it to be about vampires. Um, since she was a chemist, a chemical engineer, and all of that, she decided to make it about germ warfare. And yeah, so that was the change. It was originally about vampires, but they changed it to germ warfare between China and Russia, and the world paid for it. So this movie, the story part of it, we have Charlton Heston playing Dr. Robert Neville, and when the movie opens, we see him driving around L.A. And interestingly enough, he's the only one driving around L.A. in his car, and he's just driving all of these empty streets. We see him stop and randomly shoot at some figure up in a window. What the hell's going on? And he then goes to see Woodstock. He goes to the theater where he goes in and he sits down, and he goes upstairs and turns on the film uh, and watches the movie Woodstock. And you hear him say during the movie, best movie in town 3 years running. And he can speak every word of the dialogue. In other words, you watch him mouth the words of what they're saying on the screen. So you start really getting the impression that he's obviously seen this quite a few times, because I, as a film collector, can assure you that there are movies I can do that too. If there's any other collectors watching this, I'm sure if you had to, even if you were embarrassed about which ones, there are probably some movies in which you can mouth every word of the dialogue because you've seen it so many times. And this is, his obviously was Woodstock. Now, he sits in there and watches this movie, and when he comes out, he gets very scared, and he starts saying something about, oh my God, the sun's almost down. They'll be waking up soon, and he runs back to his apartment. Right before he gets in the car, though, he has an auditory hallucination where he hears all the phones ringing, and he screams, that there are no phones ringing. So you sort of understand that, one, he's alone because now you've seen desiccated dead bodies here and there. And two, he's obviously been at it a while because he's obviously got mental problems. Hearing an auditory hallucination like that, that's based around being alone, cabin fever type thing, lack of social human contact. So he gets back and we get introduced to his nest, which is his apartment, and he's got this elaborate security system. He gets attacked by these creatures, black robed creatures, humanoids that jump down on him, start a fire, stuff like that. He gets away from them. He gets up there, and we start learning a little bit more about the story. He's obviously been alone for a very long time. You see him in flashbacks. They tell you a little bit more of the story in flashbacks as he's talking. Now, we see now what we know as the family is outside on the street. He goes out on his balcony of his maximum security prison style security system and watches them. They're burning books, and you hear him talk about, what's it going to be next, the library, the science museum. So obviously he lets you know that these people are big time haters of technology. And during the flashbacks, we begin to see that some kind of apocalypse has occurred. And he's remembering this war. And you then see a guy named Matthias, who is a newscaster, and you see him sort of telling you the story. There is a war between Russia and China, and they have fired off germ warfare at each other, or one or the other of them did, and it contained, it exploded, and the unexpected side effect was that it's infected the world and pretty much killed all of the world population, except for survivors. There are survivors, but they are infected and will eventually turn. It's just that it happens to some people instantly. Some other people's turn into these basically walking zombie type people, intelligent but still zombies. And some that it takes a long time for it to start to turn them. So we learned that part of the story, and we kind of know what's going on now. He has been slowly trying to do two things. One, he's trying to eradicate them, while also trying to find, perfect a cure from himself. And the last bit of the flashback that cements the introductory story of this is he had discovered what he thought was a cure, or not a cure, a vaccination. So he thought that he had came up with a vaccine, and he was flying it to a base to have it tested when the person in the helicopter succumbed and turned and died almost instantly, causing them to crash. And it started to kill him as well, but he managed to crawl over to the vaccine, not knowing whether this was the one that would work or not. and he managed to inject himself, which saved him from the plague, and now he is immune from it. So basically everyone else on the planet has this disease except for him, because he is immune to it. And that's, the position that he's in. Now, he has tried to capture them, members of the family, to try to get it to work, but they don't last long enough before he has to kill them to get the work. They're too far gone, is basically what it is. So you see the family come out and try to get him to come out, because they of course want him dead. He's still using technology. He is part of the scientific community, which is what they hate. And you learn at that time that that newscaster you had saw during the flashbacks is the leader of the family, Matthias. He is the one who has done that. He's the one leading this family, this tirade and hatred of punishing the scientists and those who aren't infected, or who aren't part of the family. So we then see him the next day where he's on his hunt. That's pretty much what he does every day: gather supplies, try to exist, and try to eradicate the family. So he's in a department store looking around as usual, and he hears a noise and turns around and sees what at first seems to just be another mannequin, but it looks strange, and he can't believe what he's seeing. And Rosalind Cash was so cool. I mean, the way she could freeze and pretend to be a mannequin was pretty cool, but she couldn't hold it, and he's like, oh my god. And so he sees Rosalind Cash's character, and he starts chasing after her, chases her out, chases her through the park, stuff like that, and he finally gives up, and he literally doesn't believe it, and he's like, well, this is how it happens. I'm finally going on off that cliff, because I'm now seeing things as well as hearing phones ringing. So, he actually doesn't even really know if that was true or not. But so he continues on his little thing, where unfortunately he is finally captured by the family. He's down in a basement. They've tricked him down there. They have a trap set for him. They manage to get him. He is taken to Matthias, where you get to see the back and forth exchange of technology. This is your fault. The human race was punished, sort of a religious aspect. The human race was punished for science and scientific technology and things like that. This is our punishment, and because you do not look like us, you have not been punished. We are sentencing you to death. So they're going to take him and put a Joan of Arc on him and burn him at the stadium. They take him to do that. They have him tied up. They're going to set him on fire, when all of a sudden the stadium lights come on. Now, they are, of course, extremely photosensitive. So that blinds them, where you see another survivor come running out, whom we later find out his name is Dutch, who is cute as can be. But he comes out, he unties him, tells him, to run with them. So he runs with them, and when they get down into, the stadium tunnels, he ends up being pushed into a room, and Dutch is like, you go that way and I'll keep them occupied. And all of a sudden Rosalind Cash jumps up from behind a desk and, holding a rifle on him. And the way she talks is really cool. And she's like, you're going to come with me and you're going to shut up. You have to see it. I mean, she is so bossy. And she is so matter of fact that even he has to do nothing but say yes ma'am. So they have a bike ready. So you got this little motorcycle chase as they're getting out and going, and they manage to escape with the help of Dutch. And she takes him out to this cabin outside of town where she introduces him to I don't know, it's probably about 15 survivors, many of which are children. There's a couple of young adults like Dutch and her, and then there are about 15 other survivors that look, between 6 and 16. So she introduced him that, which, of course blows his mind because he thought he was the last man on Earth, the Omega Man. He thought he was the last man on Earth. He had no idea that there were other survivors. Now, Dutch shows back up, and he kind of explains to him that he knows who he is. He was a senior in his 4th year of medical, and he knows Neville's dissertations and books and articles, and he explains to him that yes, everyone on the planet has it, and everyone will eventually turn, but it just takes a long time in some people, but you will eventually turn. That's when Taylor, I shouldn't have done this 5 minutes after Planet of the Apes, but Neville then tells him the shocking news, and that is that there was a vaccine and that he is immune. This blows Dutch away because, they didn't know that, and now there is a vaccine. So it turns out that Lisa has a brother, her brother, Richie. So the whole reason that they had come out of the woodwork and kidnapped Dr. Neville was because they want him to help them save Richie, because Richie is in the process of turning, which can happen instantly or can take weeks. So, okay. So he checks it out. They make a plan. He ends up saying, that he has all the equipment back at his place. So Lisa, Richie, and Dr. Neville go back to his place while Dutch stays to watch, the rest of them. And he starts giving him blood transfusions and making serum out of his blood to stop Richie from transforming. During this time, of course, him and Lisa become close and sort of fall for each other. It turns out that it does work. He is able to stop Richie's transformation, thereby now making Richie immune, which means that on the scientific side, if now that Richie is also immune, his blood is now a source of the serum. So there's two people. As soon as he gets healthy, puts on some weight, they can start drawing blood from him to immunize the rest of the survivors and then move off to some place in the mountains and start humanity over again, which is basically the plan and what they would have to do. So, like I said, he manages to heal Richie and vaccinate him, and he is also working double time to put aside bottles of the serum so that he can, quickly help Lisa. Then you would have 3 people immune, and that's the way it's going to spread, is by using, the immune people's blood to immunize any other survivors. Now, Richie, you feel really sorry for Richie because Richie wants to know why he isn't trying to help members of the family. Now, you hear a little backstory from Lisa in which she says that when all of this first happened, before Matthias turned, that he was still a good guy and that he had went around gathering up what few survivors there were that didn't, die instantly. That and so for a short while, Lisa and Richie were actually part of the family before all of the family members started turning, including Matthias, which makes you crazy. And that's when they had left. Then they met Dutch and gathered what few survivors they could find and went out to that place outside of town. So that's how all that transpired. Now, Richie, he's a sweet kid, and he doesn't understand why Neville isn't going to try to help the family. Well, Neville tells him that he has tried to help the family. I mean, it's not like he hasn't thought of this before, and he has tried to get one of them and vaccinate them, but they're so far gone that he can't control them long enough to help, so he doesn't know if it would work on someone that was that far gone or had been gone long enough. Well, Richie doesn't buy that, so while he's out trying to gather, the last of the supplies, and Lisa has went out shopping for, the last of the supplies, that's when Richie writes a note and decides that he is going to go. Because he's a child, he remembers Matthias being a good guy. So he goes to tell Matthias about this cure and show him, look at me. I've been vaccinated and we can all be okay again. Well, he does that. And they get him and they bring him before Matthias, who starts telling him that he's destroyed himself, that how dare you? We don't want to be what we were before. And you are an abomination and stuff like that. Meanwhile, he comes back, Dr. Neville comes back, finds the note, and is like, what the fuck? And goes and hunt, to try to save Richie, because Richie had told him where their compound was, where they held up, which is something he had never figured out before, or he'd have wiped him out long ago. So he goes to do that, and instead when he gets there, they have crucified little Richie, which is very sad because there was a source of vaccine right there, and so they killed it, they killed him, which was horrible. So he is devastated, and he goes back home wondering where Lisa is too, because she's, I guess he figures she's back at home. So we then see Lisa coming out of one of the stores that she was in, and you hear the family walking towards Neville like they do every night to go harass him. And as she walks out and she hears Matthias and the family, this really dramatic music starts playing, a wonderful cinematography, and it sort of zooms from the front to the back of her, where she takes off her glasses and her eyes have turned white, and she takes off her scarf and her hair has turned white like Richie was, and she's in the process of turning. And so when Neville manages to get back home, he runs in screaming for Lisa, and Lisa, hollers out that she's here. I'm here, Robert. And he turns around and sees her, and she has let them in. Matthias is there, all of his bunch is there in his home. They start destroying everything, and then they're going to destroy him. He manages to get out, and with him, he has the big bottle of serum. Because all you need is one to start with. So he's like, if they get me, you know what I mean? If they get me, as long as this bottle of serum can be pumped into someone else, because he's perfected the serum now, as long as this bottle of serum can be pumped into someone else, all we need is one person that's immune, and we can make more, serum for their blood. So it's sort of like a safety thing that he had created. So he gets outside, and because of his love for Lisa, because it wouldn't have happened if he wasn't trying to save her, he turns around and needs to keep her out of the light, but he gets her over to him, which makes him vulnerable. And Matthias is up there, because he knows the whole place is fixing to blow up. So he notices Matthias up there, and then Matthias just... The only other time I've seen that is in the movie Cleopatra, when Roddy McDowell runs out of the Senate, and the guy who had come from Cleopatra to offer, her ambassador from Egypt, and he runs out and sort of like, that's Egypt right there, and harpoons him with a javelin. That's what Matthias does to Neville right here. Puts a big javelin right through him. And the place goes up in flames, which I guess kills all the others in there, including Matthias. And Neville manages to hold on because, of course, Lisa can't do anything. She's turned. So, but only just recently. So, I mean, she's like Richie was. So she's over there cowering from the light. And Neville manages to hold on because he knows Dutch and them are coming. And he manages to hold on until Dutch pulls up in front of his place, sees what's happened, runs over there to him, and Robert sort of lets him know, don't bother, I'm gone. Which he was. I mean, that fountain was full of blood. He was gone. There was probably so much internal damage from that javelin, but he managed to hold on. He tells Dutch that Lisa's right there, in the bush with her black stuff on, holding all, away from the light. She couldn't move out, with the light. So he manages to give Dutch the serum, and he says, do her first. And then, in other words, continue our plan. Use the serum to cure her. Then, because he is a med student, he was fixing to graduate. And a matter of fact, he was going to go work for the same department that Robert did. He was a fan of his. So he knows what to do. So they're going to be all right. And then Robert dies, which sucked. But he basically gave up his life to stay long enough to get the serum to Dutch. And so Dutch takes Lisa, gets her in the truck, and takes off with the serum. Obviously, he's going to pump it into her, bring her back, then probably himself, and then start, using her blood and then his blood to start this new little community, which is not, I don't know if, they better hope that there's more people out there, because I think 50 I mean, this is a off topic. This is a scientific topic, but I think you have to have 50 distinct individual genetic codes to make a viable society. So, and I think him and Lisa plus about 15 others. Richie's dead. So, I don't know if you can start a new civilization with only 17 people. I think you need 50 before you would have genetic degradation, and so I don't know. But anyway, you just have to hope that there's more people out there. And that's it. That's the way the movie ends. The Omega Man is fantastic, and continuing my discussion about it, about my experience with it, and the reason that I'm doing these three is because these were the three things, and I think you have a lot of maybe unintended consequences. For instance, I think that the reason that I never fell for any of the racism, I was raised in a small Florida backwoods town. I think that the fact that Rosalind Cash, me being 9 years old and seeing a strong, powerful black woman falling in love with and being with a white man, or being part of the gang, being tough, being strong, being part of the story, seeing dark-haired people and light-haired people, and I think that that had an effect on my 9-year-old self, because later on, when you do hear and see, when I did hear and see racism, I think that my mind had already been exposed to black people and white people working together and being fine. There's no issue. So I think that when I think about it, these three movies being the first movies that I ever saw, being exposed to cinema of this stature, because these three movies are phenomenal in so many ways. They still are masterpieces, all three of them, and of story writing, of fantasy, imagination fuel. How many times? Come on, you have to have fantasized about what you would do as the last person on Earth. I know I have. You come up with all kind of plans. This is what I would do. That's what movies are, man. Movies is magic. Movies is imagination. It's art. It fuels our imagination. And I think for a 9-year-old child to be exposed to the imaginative stuff, the different things, even if it is Charlton Heston's butt, and Rosalind Cash being a strong black female, being exposed to a strong black female character as a 9-year-old child in racist Florida. I think that there are a lot of consequences for what a kid can be exposed to. And these three movies is they are what turned me into a cinema nut. I was always wanting to go to the movies after seeing these three movies that weekend. And he wouldn't let me go to many, but I think I saw Star Wars, maybe a couple of other movies between these three and 14 years old, when I was taken to see the Friday the 13th by my dad, who took me and he didn't know it, but one of my first little boyfriends took us to see Friday the 13th. he didn't know what it was. It scared the hell out of him, and he wanted to leave, but we made him stay, mainly by making fun of him. I mean, come on, Dad. Are you going to act like a pussy in front of your 14-year-old kid? Really? Why are you screaming and throwing popcorn all over the car? Right? So, I think my dad sat and watched. Oh no, there was another movie. He took me to see Midway at the drive-in between these three movies and Friday the 13th. I think he took me to see Star Wars, and he took me to see Midway, like, you know, that old Henry Fonda movie, the war movie Midway. It was a double feature of Midway and Tora Tora Tora. I remember my dad taking me to the drive-in to see that movie, to see a revival of those two classic movies. And I don't think that he knew what Friday the 13th was. And he did make a fool of himself. My dad screamed. He threw popcorn all over the car. We laughed at him. He wanted to leave. I don't want to watch this kind of shit. Let's get out of here. And we were like, are you scared? And my dad was like, I ain't scared of nothing. And it's like, okay. But then why the popcorn out of my hair? What's up with that? And why do you want to go? Just shut up and watch the movie. So that's how I got to see all of Friday the 13th, because if he had his way, he had a hauled ass out of there like Dukes of Hazzard. You know what I'm saying? But he didn't want to look like a pussy in front of his 14-year-old son, so he stayed and watched Friday the 13th, which scared the shit out of him. I think he had panic attacks the whole time. But yeah, this I was forever changed by these three movies, and I think that they had, you know, lifelong consequences. I think that me seeing Rosalind Cash is why I ended up loving Get Christy Love and Foxy Brown, because I was really fascinated by those blaxploitation films like Foxy Brown and Coffee and stuff like that, because I was exposed to Rosalind Cash. And so Get Christy Love and, you know, Foxy Brown was cool. You know, I think it does affect you, the things that you see at a very young age. I know it turned me into a horror hound, because the Omega Man is definitely horror-ish movie. So yeah, 1971, the Omega Man, our second discussion of the Holy Heston Trilogy. And yeah, we will be back with Soylent Green, and I will give my thoughts and discussions on that, and remunerations and reminiscences. Remember, you are an awesome, very special person, no matter what anybody is doing or saying to you. You are the only one of you on this whole planet, and you can't take that away. That's naughty. No matter what's happening, you have to stick it out, and you have to keep the only one of you on the only one of planet we have, kind of, yeah, something. Trying to be inspirational. But love you, miss you, bye. Keep rocking very, very hard, and keep screaming, but only when appropriate, so that you don't get sectioned. And I will see you in Soylent Green. Do I have stuff to say about Soylent Green? But see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by. When did you first see these? Have you ever seen them? What were the first movies you ever saw or were exposed to? Remember, I was very sheltered. I was raised half in England, half in Florida. Neither one of my families, either one of them, cared fuck all about the movies. I don't think I ever went to the movies with my mother's side of the family. Nobody was interested in movies. So for me to become like a movieholic is kind of interesting. But it's because of these three, and that's why I've chosen to do them, because they are very, very special to me because of that reason. See you in the next one. Love you, miss you. Bye.